And so we return and begin again. Welcome to the Invisible Podcast, issue sode 19. I'm Bobsy. We are going issue by issue, page by page, panel by panel, theory by theory through Grant Morrison's cosmic conspiracy comic book classic, The Invisibles. It's from the 90s. Onto the cover. First of all, our sturdiness test, of course, strong. It's a strong issue. I mean, is it a good issue? I don't know if it's one of the greatest ones, actually. It appears to sort of fiddle and rush a bit, but it's it's all right. It's got a cool cover. Sean Phillips has been banging them out in a very impressive way over this King Mob related run. We are, of course, on part 3 of King Mob in Entropy in the UK. Pardon me. I don't know if prior to this point I'd even mentioned why it's called Entropy in the UK. There's an obvious Sex Pistols kind of twisted reference in there. But like the Michael Moorcock Cornelius novels are often referred to as the Entropy Quartet or something. Because entropy is obviously a measure of disorder in a system. Chaos magicians like disorder. I kind of don't think they do. I think they kind of acknowledge disorder and attempt to turn coherence from it towards their own desired ends. Right. That's kind of the point there. But in the Cornelius books, basically, Jerry's messing around with his dad's time machine caused a state of like permanent entropic collapse across the multiverse. That's why things are always so crazy and always so kind of worsening, kind of like degrading and losing clarity. Um, and that's maybe what's happening here throughout these 3 issues to our guy King Mob. So from this cover, we've got a few interesting points of difference to the previous 2 covers. Have I got them easily to hand here? Or maybe exciting. I've got them under the Cunning Man's Handbook and this amazing Stathis Tsembalidis book called, oh my goodness, don't even know, Hisashi from Decadence Books. If you're not into them, you should be. Okay, so this is the cover to issue 17. I don't have the cover to issue 18 to hand, unfortunately. Sorry, but it's a bit like that. But he looks like Ian Brown, right? So you've got 2 sort of variations of like late 60s and early 70s mods posing with guns. One of them surrounded by this kind of like 90s fractal take on 60s Paisleyism in the background. The other one had like this kind of nice Bridget Riley, op art lines. This one is kind of more colourful, but much more like non-specifically 90s sort of tie-dye swirl rave here. It looks like it's been, it looks like it's either some very early digital kind of manipulation of a page, pardon me, or they've even just done the very straightforward and good old school thing of like moving a bit of paper around on a photocopier, which the like Vertigo comics relied on a lot to make crazy looking things happen in the period in question. This is from April 1996. That's the period in question. But rather than like mod hippies posing with guns and kind of in fantasy non-guns at that, this is our actual boy King Mob wearing one of his lovely kind of McQueenie sort of fetish vests, actually kind of pointing the gun in a threatening manner. He's still wearing like Lennon's, the shades. Obviously, their hair is gone. Relatable. Quick cup of tea, sorry. But like notice how like he's using the gun, right? And it's a gun. It's just like one of those, generic action automatic pistols that you get in comics and films. I think the pink and the blue colours work really well. It's interesting that kind of as we get into this third and final issue of the King Mob origin story kind of arc, we're kind of like stepping through his fantasy personae. I'm not sure who the he there is. Let's assume that it's King Mob, but I think we all also know that it's the he that we've been looking at here for a few weeks for a few months rather is Grant Morrison himself. We're kind of working through these fantasy personae, and we've arrived at one that is kind of actually not necessarily real, although within the comic, obviously, King Mob is the real one that we're dealing with. Or as real as these kind of awarenesses of ontological validity get. He is manifest now, right? He's kind of gone through his personae and now he's kind of condensed into his physical and final perfected 90s form: jeans, fetish vest, actually using the gun, muscly, not posing, but like actively using the gun to do something real. And who needs hair anyway, right? So yeah, April 96. Oh, we're recording this in for a bit of a Corona context. Corona eats time, so it's very difficult to remember whether you're a million years old or whether you were born yesterday or whether it's autumn, winter, or somewhere in between. I would say that it is nearly winter, the dark winter, right? That's what they're all saying. Uh, Wait, so 2020 has been the worst year ever. 2021 is set to be, the other worst year ever. I noticed while I was reading this issue that, or not even that, but just like thinking about the Invisibles in general, so much of like the like digital technocratic takeover stuff that we haven't really got to yet in the Invisibles, but which forms a massive part of book two, is sounds like uncannily like this stuff that Grandmaster put in the comic book 20 odd years ago sounds uncannily like what they talking about when with all the great reset chat, which is kind of obviously we're about to get the real big lowdown on in a couple of months time in the Davos conference in January 2021. 2021 is set to be the year of the great reset. It sounds like the kind of the baddies victory in the Invisibles is what it sounds like the Great Reset, basically. There's no simple opening than that. It sounds like that. So that'll be a laugh. Watch out for that. And we haven't really got there yet as far as issue 19, but stuff in the Invisibles, certainly into the second book, does really start to point towards a revelatory experience in 2012, which was kind of like some kind of weird cosmic convergence stroke time wave zero stroke Mayan apocalypse thing that we were all into about 8 years ago. I'm not saying the end of the world happened. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm not saying that a new world was born, although I think most of us think that maybe it was. But I'm going to say that maybe embedded and kind of interwoven with this dense layering of codes and ciphers and acrostics and substitutions and various sleights of informational hand, that the 2012 2012 stuff that the Invisibles is building up to all the way through its run is maybe a simple little jinky jank, and then it's not 2021, it's not 2012, it actually is 2021. The Invisibles isn't about 2012, it's about 2021. That's what I'm saying. So strap in. Moving on to the inside, I don't want to talk about the Sandman anymore. So this advert for a Death miniseries by Neil Gaiman and Chris Bacalo and co. Don't care. Not going to talk about it, other than to say that her appearance at the kind of very start of this issue should maybe lead us to think about kind of second guessing King Mob's kind of obsession with the art of death and how that's maybe not a very nice thing, which this issue kind of skirts around in its somewhat kind of like fakely optimistic and kind of giddy pop way. And also that, remember when Lord Fanny and Boy were in the Smart Drinks Cafe a couple of episodes ago, or ages ago now actually, but when they pulled the death card, right? I think this is a nice little reminder that we are still within the divinatory purview of that spread that they did, and the death card being there. It wasn't even a spread, was it? It was just a single card. But the death card, that's what we're saying still, right? Onto the front page. Woo! I mean, just look at it. You can't see it very well on this. I hope you're looking at it via your own copy. So we start off and like basically having gone inside King Mob's mind at the end of the last issue, with his kind of like ha moment. Sir Miles, our baddie, is very much now just walking around inside this yellow submarine, I was going to say, but pink submarine version of King Mob's mind. The color choice here is really interesting, actually. I think like that kind of so like someone cleverer than me, one of my comic book mates, would know what the kind of the pink color wash that was used in a lot of like British boys comics through from like the 50s to the 70s was called, and why they did it like that is obviously some sort of just side effect of the printing process, and not side effect but like affordance that the printing process had, and you could add a cheap third pinkish color very easily. um uh I think that's why this has gone pink, and also I think that like to make this to go with a yellow submarine esque color palette to kind of give this highly psychedelic scene the full, you know, um, let's go for it Dayglow palette would be much more than the colorist would have wanted to go with. Um, this is a very beautifully drawn and kind of busy and exciting page that Phil Jimenez, and please remember that when I say Phil Jimenez, I mean Phil Jimenez and John Stokes, have put together here. We've got crashed World War I fighter jets, monorails, magicians, scary cats with barbed scorpion tails, um, floating landscapes made out of faces, impossible stairways, mansions, flying eyeballs, a decorative Art Deco lamp being held on a hand that's made of gaps, collapsed ruins, archways, waterfalls, uh, three Grace-esque women, sideways churches, broken old clocks. Um, yeah, eyeball for hot air balloons, burning papers, um, crashed planes. This is mushrooms. Yeah, lots of mushrooms. This is the inside of King Mob's mind, and a pretty crazy place it is too. And it looks fab. It's like it's the kind of the 60s psychedelia of it is really nicely realized, and the work on it is incredibly fine for a page which isn't even our splash page, although it does make quite a splash. It's just great. So Miles is kind of walking around inside it going, oh, I'm inside his mind. He's kind of talking to Dr. Franklin on the outside back in the real world. It's like living someone else's dream. There are memories falling all around me, like cracked dead leaves, cracked and yellow. Real memories, no more pathetic cover stories. So his real memories are fairly chaotic. I'm going to say that a lot of these memories are more like fantasies, and I think that like I don't know how scripted this was, but some Miles sees memories, I think we learn that like the memories and the fantasies are very much the same thing when it comes to King Mob's mind, and indeed all of our minds. Don't take your memories for granted. Um, and we get a really good, very brisk and quick, so all of these memories are in the form of like old photographs are falling down around him, and someone else starts grabbing them and looking at and knowing King Mob's history, his life, his memories, his mind. I'm going to say mind like that, not just mind. I'm going to say mind throughout the episode. I might not. So no more Kirk Morrison, the writer, no, which is one of King Mob's, that's his kind of pseudonym as a writer. No more Gideon Stargrave, the character I see, the truth now falling all around me. Now, this might not be the truth, but this is the truth that we've got at this point, and it's as close to truth with King Mob's, spoilers, King Mob's origin as we ever get. So let's just say this is it. Morrison is the fiction. Wait a minute, the guy who wrote the comic is called Morrison. And as for Stargrave, he was born Gideon Starozewski in Krakow, 1960 or 61. His father, I would say, sort of 19. So basically, he's probably a Scorpio, right? So he was born around now, right, towards the end of the year. So let's say he was probably born Scorpio 1960 and was a baby in early 61. Um, His father was a Polish artist, his mother an English political radical. He returned with his mother and grew up in a high-rise flat in Chelsea. So he didn't have much influence from his dad, or indeed was in Poland. He looks like he was. I think we're supposed to suggest that we're supposed to think that this picture is from Chelsea, from London. So when it was just him and his mum, otherwise you might see his dad in there. So we could see that he was, only 1 or 2 at the most before he moved to England, um, which is great. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of Polish people in the building that I live in, and they're lovely, and it's it's like, you know, immigration is cool. What can I say? Uh, he returned to England. Well, that little portable, and this is just such a classic sort of like boomer memory. That little portable record player in his bedroom, clanging raucous music, Gen X, sorry, uh, filling music, filling his head with adolescent drivel, anarchy, and insurrection. And then here's King Mob posing outside his school with, an imaginary one would achieve M16, yeah, or just like gun, toy gun, probably. I mean, inevitably. Singing along to the Sex Pistols from Anarchy in the UK. Quite the little rebel, aren't we, Starozevsky? Starozevsky. Um, so the King Mob thing kind of really works here. You remember the King Mob memoirs that we were looking through the other day, last episode or 2 ago. So like Tcepxe isn't Ladbroke Grove, it isn't Notting Hill, but it's not far. The fact that they grew up in a high-rise flat means they weren't posh. And the fact that she was a English political radical means that there wasn't a huge amount of money going around. So working class family. Tcepxe, he basically would have been in the air, or pretty much at ground zero, for most of the public. What did they call them? Situations, I guess, that King Mob and Co. did. The group King Mob did in the late 60s and early 70s. In West London. It's not far from where King Mob grew up, so it's very likely that he wasn't just that he was a witness or a participant in the kind of the way that these were sort of, the audience were the participants in this, in these kind of open political theatrical interventions. Um, yeah, he's not kind of like King Mob hasn't got the name King Mob from a book. He was probably there, mixed up in it a bit, or at least witness to it when it kind of arose in the right place and time. Nice little detail. Behind him, there's a pile of burning books. What do we think of that? Remember the line that Dane obviously burnt his school library down in issue 1. He was rebuked with the line, "Only Nazis burn books." And here we have King Mob burning a load of books, standing outside his old school. So he's very much a chip off the Danish block. Dane-like block. I think, as I think I said this before, I think that like burning books in the Invisible's kind of metaphorical scheme is like reading books. I think we're supposed to learn that he read a lot when he was a kid, which so you should. Okay, now this page, obviously, as I just said, is absolutely brilliant. Although it's a story page, it's not a splash page. It is dominated by this kind of big single image at the back, and it's really beautifully rendered. It took them absolutely ages, you can tell, because the line work on it is really fine. And then you go over to the actual splash page for the issue, and it looks a bit shit because, frankly, they were done. This is John Stokes and Fu Jimenez going, "We've got other work to do next month. We need to get this one finished." So this one, unfortunately, does look and feel a bit rushed. Now, let's go back over here. So a bit like the covers, sorry, a bit like the covers of the issues of this run, the splash pages are kind of embedding some interesting sort of story in them too. So this is from episode 1 of the arc, and we've got King Mob, or Gideon Stargrave rather, kind of with the Union Jack and the Palace of Westminster, Big Ben, there. In the middle episode, remember, there was like that weird James Bond, Gideon Stargrave again posing like this, posing in front of like a statue of a Buddha with like loads of naked women sort of all around him. And then we have this, which is him standing in front of, again, all of these Polaroid memories or photographs, basically, kind of just lying flat and 2-dimensional against this, just outer space scene. I think there's an evolution, and we don't really get into this again until the next book of the Invisibles, which isn't, which we won't get to for ages, frankly. Oh, the neighbours are talking. Can you hear that? Exciting. Um, Everyone's indoors. Literally, the whole world's indoors. It's really weird. This is 2020 lockdown 2.0. Oh, did I mention that? I don't think I did. This is the second lockdown episode. Everyone's indoors. Everyone's going mad. People are talking about their computers very loudly. Um, so I think we've got like an evolution. So look, we've got some very sort of solid old school markers of the empire, right? Of imperium, the flag and the kind of the literal sort of phallus from which all imperial dictates emanate. We go through this kind of empire of desire. I'm going to say whether it's a desire for like a kind of a transcendent, a desire for like a transcendent religious experience, or the kind of the libidinal and sort of what's the word I'm looking for here? Let's just go libidinal. The kind of the sexy time desire based of naked chicks, and the way that those are kind of resolved, right, quite nicely, in fact, in the kind of the tantric sex scene between King Mob and Edith at the end of that issue. But it's like so we're moving from solid institutions to a control of and kind of a manipulation of desire as being kind of vectors of empire. And here we have, as we move up to the present day and the real world, if you like, um, what am I trying to say? The empire is of images. It's an empire of images. Okay, yeah, empire of institutions, empire of desire, empire of images. Yeah. So this is how the empire now manifests, and obviously it's skipped across the Atlantic in the intervening period, and like throughout the length of King Mob's life, really. Um, and although it doesn't look quite as nice as some of the other splash pages that we've had recently, it is pretty interesting. So up here, one of the Polaroids or newspaper front page pictures that's been cut out and flung into space is of Pamela Anderson, which is like the third or fourth time she's popped up. Blah blah blah. Modern incarnation of Aphrodite, kind of changed forever, or at least kind of reinvented the way that female sexuality is kind of explored and exploited in pop culture, mass media. Uh, Chap here maybe dying of AIDS, I think, sadly. I think this bit here, I think he might be Dwayne Kearns. I really meant to look him up. I didn't know whether that was the name of the first um, victim of HIV in the USA. Am I going to Google that quickly? Maybe I will. I don't normally do this. Let's have a look at the guy's name. Dwayne Kearns. Dwayne Kearns per year. Yeah. He was. I think he was the first person to die of AIDS in the USA. So that's very sad. Um, uh, Space shuttle takeoff, maybe Challenger. I really like this sequence here where we have this kind of, you can only just see it, but like this kind of creepy tribal war mask turning into this kind of like abstracted Buddhist mandala, then kind of leads, and the line here moves directly into King Mob's war mask. So I quite like that you go from one mask to another, because this does look a bit like an abstracted face, and then back into the mask. I like to play with the thought that the mandala is a mask. That's got some interesting territory there, I think, and that behind it is, well, another mask, frankly, but that's okay. O.J. Simpson, famous murder guy, the Buddha again. A little rat here. I think this rat probably had, like an ear grown on its back. It was like an early, like, genetic-y kind of, in the 90s. There was a lot of like genetics. There still is, obviously, but we just call them different things now. Genetics. research. Clones, Dolly the sheep, all that kind of thing. Um, I think this rat has probably like got a human organ growing in it or something like that. A burning, yeah, like this looks like a sort of a. This could be happening in Libya or maybe in Kosovo or Bosnia or something. Um, this is a tank kind of driving past what looks to be a modern, westernized building with in flames and having been destroyed. So this is like war. And this kind of supermodel here, I think it might be Naomi Campbell. It's either like generic supermodel culture, uh, kind of a different sort of way of just kind of. It's quite interesting that there are different ends of the page here, the Pamela Anderson and the supermodel, um, insofar as they kind of represent slightly different takes on like not just female sexuality, right, but like the representation of feminine beauty as it's the representation of feminine beauty. Slightly different poles, kind of like a kind of a slightly high culture one here, you'd say, or at least a high couture, and then the more kind of earthy, proly one here. Um, what am I going to say about that? So Pamela Anderson pops up all the time in the Invisibles. It's funny because she kind of is, and she's kind of cool. But she also the Julian Assange thing is weird, and we've talked about that. Like the Assange trial finished recently. Don't think a decision has been made on it yet. Although, how would you know? When would you hear? Where would you see these things? Um, but yeah, the fact that she was his mate and was like popping into the embassy to see him all the time, it's just a bit fishy, isn't it? Um, and if this is as I think it might be, Naomi Campbell, I would draw attention to her Medusa-esque hairstyling, and I would say that Naomi Campbell went to a lot of parties with Ghislaine Maxwell. I think, didn't she? I think she did. Um, over the page. Uh, so yeah, that's the splash page. Over the page, still in black and white. This is all just like the photos and Sir Miles flicking through King Mob's um, memories and lifetime. He's in a pop group. This is one of those Ed Balls esque, like early '80s neo psych, slightly crappy pop band. I mean, I know it's really weird when you listen to these bands. There's a lot to enjoy there, and yet you can really see why they didn't connect and take off. Why they were cult bands only. They were so close to kind of being brilliant that they kind of missed the mark totally for being brilliant and became almost like just like kind of rubbish. And that's okay because the world has got rubbish in it, and we need to kind of be okay with that. Um, but like and in the 90s when this comic came out, this band from 1980 would look like they were would look like they were 15 years ahead of the curve, frankly, because this, apart from the fact that they're a bit too particular in their dress, um, this vibe was very much in the air in '96, right, and in the charts and all over everywhere. So this band of King Mobs that he was in, all of this, it hardly goes without saying, reflects Grant Morrison's biography quite closely. Um, he's in this band. He has a breakdown. There are links with occult groups in Leeds. That's basically the initiates of Thanateros and the kind of um, the early chaos magicians. They were basically based in. There's kind of offshoots in them in Stoke Newington, East London, and other ones up in Leeds. I'm pretty sure it was like Ray Sherwin and Peter Carroll were the Leeds-based ones at the time. Um, so yeah, that's where chaos magic comes from, and that's what uh, Gideon Tcepxe who became King Bob was up to in 1980 and 81. So in definitely like not only was he in at the ground floor with King Mob, but he was also in at the ground floor with Chaos Magic per se. And in 1985, yes, he writes his first horror novel, Dis. It's published under the pseudonym Kirk Morrison. The second book is Lord Worm. We've had Worm stuff pop up before, right? Crom and all of that, the worm god burrowing through the city. The second book is Lord Worm by 1988. He's rich, so I think we're supposed to think that he's a Lovecraftian like horror author. you can get rich on that shit still, actually, but you definitely could in the mid 80s. In real life, the Lord Worm book is Grant Morrison's, which came out in 1989 or 88. Grant Morrison's book, Arkham Asylum, like the Batman comic that he did with Dave McKean of Sandman covers fame. Uh, what am I going to say about that? Morrison and McKean, by all accounts, got super lucky with the deal. Basically, it was the first comic. I think it was the first comic ever published in hardback. I think. I mean, maybe there were like Harriman or Crumb collections that were hardback before that, but I think it was the first original graphic novel. Graphic novel. First original like hardbound comic. I think in the world. I think, or at least in America. I think anyway. Right. Uh, and Morrison and McKean were like down for like I think they each made because it was really expensive. They each like had a royalty rate of like $1 per copy or something, which is just crazy. And it sold 250,000 copies. They were minted basically. 250,000 in 1989 money. That's all right. You can go on holiday with that. Uh, so he was kind of and Morrison was minted pretty much after that point, uh, and working nicely for a decent rate, writing comic books for DC. I mean, uh, talented guy. What can you say? It is worth interesting that maybe worth mentioning just for a little bit of a little bit of cool you jets that as much as we might like esoteric magic stuff here, uh, the tools of sociology and historical materialism that were developed in the 19th and 20th centuries are really useful to have in your back pocket. And like I would merely note that if you look at like the cost of housing and food and the amount of dole, like unemployment benefit, basically, that was available in 1980, especially if you were squatting, which, given that he was in Leeds in 1980, he probably was, um, meant that you could meant like you could live very nicely on the largesse of the government, and you just can't now. You had enough time to kind of, if you had a bit of grift, a bit of hustle, to like a band or something to bring you in a bit of extra quid, you could do, and you didn't have dependents, you didn't have to look after your mum in Chelsea or a family or whatever. Then unemployment benefit was enough for a pretty decent. If you look at how expensive beer was and stuff, you could get pissed a couple of times a week on the dole, and it was all right. Um, and that's not the case now. So this, like, and I think to get dark about it, um, a bunch of the chaos magicians became landlords. It's as simple as that, right? A lot of the Temple of Psychic Youth people or whatever just stayed in the squats, took them over, bought them up for nothing, turned them into flats, and are now like Thatcher's evil genius. As much as they claimed to be counterculture, Thatcher's genius was to onboard people like this into the capitalist class, right? To turn them into capitalist stakeholders so that they would defend the system. Uh, and she did that by kind of taking all of the resources of the post-war period, putting them into private hands, and now we live in hell. Cracking. Um, thanks, guys. Okay, and the royalties from the money pay for the search. He goes backpacking. He's going looking for the Invisibles, who he's heard of during his time up in Leeds with the occultists. He goes to India. He had his mind blown. It's such a cliche. It's brilliant. Uh, and he sees the invisible. This is like the invisible HQ. It's not like having a HQ isn't a very invisible thing really, but there's like lovely ashram or whatever in India is is like the temple where the invisibles go to learn how to be badasses, right? And then Samars is still walking around inside his mind. He thinks he can hide his thoughts from me. He's wrong, Franklin. I'll tear his mind to shreds if that's what it takes. We have like this kind of like sexy death goddess woman here, who obviously we saw King Mob doing it with in the previous issue. Lots of crashed biplanes. It's all very sort of Bigglesy and Boy's Own. Um, so Miles looks quite dapper here. He's dressed in Cambridge boating regalia, basically. Obviously, we don't know much about Sir Miles's background yet. We will learn a lot more. We don't know much about Sir Miles's background yet, but he's obviously a Cambridge man, right? The security forces in the UK traditionally recruit from Cambridge, like the civil services and court, if you like, tend to recruit from Oxford, but the security services, people who are if you're needed to be a bit more practically minded to and pull a few triggers, you're more likely to have gone to the sort of more hard sciencey stuff that they teach at Cambridge. So yeah, there's a very long historical link between security service recruitment and Cambridge University. Okay, we're back in the room. Key mob is there's a cool bit here. Uh, there are elements of this business which you're not authorized to comprehend. Just be thankful you don't have to answer to Miss Dwyer and her supervisor in the other room. That's great, right? That the Archon is just a scary supervisor in the next room. The King of all Tears, whatever, is sorry, was it the King in Chains? No, the King of all Tears is basically just a horrible boss, or even not even boss, kind of just like middle management who happens to have power of life and death over you. That aside, I appreciate your concern. And Franklin's like, what? I didn't express any concern. And he's like, oh, sorry, going into people's minds messes with the space-time continuum. I was like, what's he saying? Yes, I see. This sort of work often affects space-time perception. Um, Perhaps you'd be so kind as to fetch me a paper tissue, Franklin. I seem to have mislaid my handkerchief. Pay attention. So he's doing psychic interrogation on King Mob still. He kind of, and then you sort of break out of the in the mind bit. We're back in the room now, as I said. I can easily take from you the information I need, but I'd much rather hear it from you. Now, my boy, you've seen what we can do. Even your thoughts are no longer your own. And King Mob was like, we don't want you to betray your friends against your will. We want you to do it because you know that it is your duty. Remember the stuff I was saying about them, about like the voluntarism of the baddies being really important to them. That they don't want a broken thing to be on their side. That's not a productive asset. They want a thing that's reconciled to its position within the machine, but also uh, likes it and wants to be in it because their vibe is totalizing, right? They don't want you to if you go along with it, but secretly you hate them. That's no good for them because there's still a crack in the machinery there, right? So they want him, to voluntarily submit to ratting out his mates, even though they've done it through torture. It doesn't make sense, or at least the logic is broken. But that's how they roll. We do not merely destroy our enemies, we change them. Do you understand what I mean by that? We're going to find out. But before we do, we get a advert break. This is for the advert Paradise Lost, Draconian Times. That album featuring the first single, Enchantment. It's a new breed of gothic, described as Metallica meets Sisters of Mercy. Awesome. By Metal Hammer magazine, 4.5 fists. Is it Dave McKean on the art? Well, that would be weird, wouldn't it? I hadn't even thought of that, but it's possible that this art here, given that I just mentioned him in relation to Morrison's big money book, it looks a bit like him, doesn't it? It also looks like it isn't. But this is sort of very McKean-esque, showing his influence on the kind of popular commercial art of the age. What to say about this? I hated it. But so Metal Hammer magazine say it sounds like Metallica meets Sisters of Mercy. Awesome, 4.5 fist. I say it sounds like Metallica meets Sisters of Mercy. I don't give a shit. It was full of real. It's got all of the pretension of Sisters of Mercy and all of the dumbness of Metallica, both of which I do have time for occasionally in isolation. But you bring them together, that's a horrible combination. Yeah, I hated this. I thought it was rubbish. But In fact, there are a few adverts in this entire issue. I'm going to skip over a lot of them because this is the worst issue for music that we've had, as far as I can remember. I hated every single record in this that was in this issue. Um, Draconian Times, Enchantment. Yeah, it definitely fits, doesn't it? I don't want to go too much into Milton or whatever, but think about Draconian Times being the thing that obviously King that Sir Miles wants. Think about Milton's nonconformity and how that spins out of some historical processes that we discussed a few issues back. The Puritan tradition. How does revolution kind of not? I think we've got Paradise Lost deals with like a very important kind of cosmic war revolution. How do revolutions kind of feed into new status quos? I would rather be listening to a record by status quo. uh, yeah, so it's thematically it's on point, right? It's fine, and we okay. Oh god, there's another advert over the page. Vampire: The Dark Ages. Really cool cover art here by Kent Williams, I think. Sorry, no, John Bolton. Uh, John Bolton, who has currently in the world of 1996, has got that Man Bat book out with James Lane. Did I tell you that I tracked that down? I found it in the shop, and Hugh, bless him, I think he gave it to me for well cheap. It was only like £9 or something for all three books in the original format. Um, it is daft actually. It's got like it's quite good fun. It's got like loads of Batman sort of just like walking around in the sunshine and people looking at him going, all right, and him like, I'm very serious. It's quite it gets its laughs in quite obliquely, but well. 5 years ago, White Wolf. This is for Vampire: The Dark Ages. 5 years ago, White Wolf. Oh, it's White Wolf Publishing again. We're used to them. Turned the world of role-playing games upside down with the release of Vampire: The Masquerade, the best-selling critically again. Um, The Dark Ages, and we've got some kind of like there's this kind of like non-specific Aztec Mayan work here. The Dark Ages. We're kind of this references the English Renaissance. This is it fair to say call Milton English Renaissance? I think it is, isn't it? It was a bit later, maybe. Maybe I'm an idiot. You decide. I really like the art. The vampire. I presume she's a vampire. If not, she needs help. Uh, the look in her face is brilliant. It's a really cool picture by John Bolton. He really sort of there is this quite I'm not going to call it subtle, but there's quite like a sneaky sense of humor in Bolton's work, which, given that he was like the master of horror, is important. Uh, Beware, the darkness you need fear most is the darkness within yourself. Yeah. Okay, and we've moved across to the adjoining or nearby cell, where, remember her, Lord Fanny is being kept. She is kind of having a chat with the guard. She keeps calling him darling, which he hates. Oh yeah. Uh, and she's kind of got a bit of a, she's been looking a bit desperate for the past couple of issues when we've had the pleasure of seeing her, but um, she's beginning to look a little bit. She's beginning to look a little bit like she likes it at the moment, and then she kind of pulls quite a scary face here, and then she holds up this handkerchief. Remember that she wants to call Sir Miles, and she's kind of twisted it into like a human shape. I think we know what she's doing here, don't we? Over on the page, we're back in the other room. This is page 6 now. Okay, this is quite a pivotal bit of the book, I think. And when I say the book, I don't just mean the issue. I kind of mean the Invisibles a bit. I don't want to go too far because I kind of think it's a bit dumb and boring. But actually, no, do I mean that? I don't actually mean that. I think it's a bit. I think it's a bit annoying to get your head around. And I think that some of the assumptions in it kind of come from a place which was kind of where people kind of took their uh, kind of speculations without enough pinches of salt. It's all like so. Sir Miles is explaining to King Mob why it's not enough for them to just torture you into submission and get you to obey. Why they want you to believe in your heart that you obey, and why you're doing it out of duty. Uh, I want you to, and this is also Miles talking to King Mob. I want to help you grow beyond this adolescent frustration you feel. This need to prove yourself to step out from your mother's shadow. Everything that Sir Miles says here is true, basically. It's it's nasty because he's nasty, but none of it. It's all just a different perspective on what the Invisibles are like, and it's all fairly like, you can definitely see the path to truth that he follows, even if you don't want to join him on that path. But you can, the writing here is good because it effectively, counterposes the rah rah rah, aren't we all brilliant anarchist stuff that the Invisible's going for. Um, you think you're fighting for freedom, and imagine I'm doing this in Sir Miles' voice. You think you're fighting for freedom? From what? From whom? Your chains are imaginary. The mass of the people are free, free to live and work and die. How dare you presume to liberate them from their comfortable lives? I mean, it's not that difficult to disagree with, but how you must loathe yourself, so eager to struggle against anything but your own inadequacy. The truth is, you long to be like us, but because you cannot fit. I mean, it's just classic Tory, isn't it? It's just like classic Tory asshole stuff. And you kind of go, that's not it, mate. That's not why I hate you. It's not going to be like you. But you can see why they think that because it's convenient and easy. Anyway, what is this infantile urge to destroy that which others have laboured to build? I take it, and this bit's kind of confusing. I take it you are familiar with Orwell's 1984. Political pornography drooled over by those who talk of freedom, yet thrill to depictions of absolute control. That's Sir Miles's hot take on 1984, which, as we've sort of established, is a it's a important text underlying the freedom versus control dialectic dynamic that the whole comic of the Invisibles is about, right? Political pornography, drooled over by those who talk of freedom yet thrill to depictions of absolute control. Let me show you how far beyond those ideas we have gone. Interesting, isn't it? You've got the political pornography. Like, the people who read it are just kind of getting their jollies, but rather than like getting their sex jollies, they're getting their politics jollies. I think there's a lot in that of like the for the read some effing Orwell contingent on that we see in like media discourse currently, that like people for whom politics is about jollies and getting them off, really like Orwell because because there's like a stakeslessness in his in their world. And so you can just read Orwell and you can put all of these evils that he's writing about in a novel. You could keep them packed in the novel, because if you don't really have any kind of sincerely held political objections, if you don't think that people should be liberated from their freedom to live and work and die, um, then it's nice to have this nice book that kind of lays it all out as like, oh dear, scary entertainment, right? I think there's something in that. I think it's a weird take, especially a weird take for '96 when you wouldn't have that many conversations with people drooling over Orwell. Um, but now you do. Also, remember that Orwell and Orwell was. I've discussed this before, but Orwell was taught at Eton by Huxley, right? And now Grant Morrison is writing an adaptation of Huxley's Brave New World for the telly, and it's not he's not writing it, it's done, it's out. And they both, they were both absolutely members of the British establishment. Huxley a bit less so, if any, but it was more just about uh, Huxley sort of represents, even though he was the older man, he represents like a kind of an evolution of um, the kind of bricks and mortar version of control that Orwell sort of wrote about to this kind of like empire of desire model where, you know, sensuousness and wanting and California sunshine fit into, like you can make freedom sunny too, right? Oh, sorry, you can make control sunny too, and make it look like freedom, and make it look like pleasure, make it look like desire, and then it gets really good. Remember that King Bob is still under the drug, Key 17, that they gave him, which makes him see the language that he encounters. It wasn't just the so. How many fingers am I holding up? So he's holding up 4 fingers, right? And how many fingers am I holding up? And this is all from Orwell too, right? This is Winston Smith in Room 101. Like they're trying to tell him, they're trying to change his brain so that he sees 5 fingers when he's told to, despite the evidence of 4 fingers. And Winston is kind of being tortured into doing the work internally, cognitively, to transform 4 into 5 and to accept that obvious mistruth as not just truth, but like a totalizing underlying truth that's being given to him by Big Brother, or by what's his name, the baddie guy in Big Brother. I can't remember his name. The bureaucrat guy, the minister. Of course, for what you see, that is what you see. But 4 is only a word, because King Bob goes, "It's 4 fingers." Uh, have you ever wondered why we talk of spelling? There is a spell word, an abracadabra, implanted in the brain of every English-speaking child. The root mantra of restriction, the secret name of a mighty hidden demon. A B C D E F G H I J K L M N O P Q R S T U V W X Y Z. This is great. That name and all the names it generates. And while he's saying this, he's written the word 5 fingers on a bit of paper. That name and all the names it generates were designed to set limits upon humanity's ability to express abstract thought. Now, this kind of comes from Orwell too. Obviously, it connects to Newspeak. And Orwell had a real bee in his bonnet about this. And I think this is a blind alleyway. I think that the stuff about language literally controlling the things we perceive is not necessarily borne out by a further 30 or 40 years of, or in Orwell's case, 70 years of research into, cognitive linguistics. And the whole thing about like you can't see a thing until you have a word for it, like, not true. Like, of course you can. There are plenty of things that I don't know what they are, and you see them, and then somebody tells you what they are, and you're like, oh, okay, right. But it's not like you didn't see it beforehand, or even work out how to use what a nutcracker is without knowing what a nutcracker is, right? You use it to crack your nuts. um, that name and all the names it generates were designed to set limits upon humanity's ability to express abstract thought. I think that Orwell was like an Ing-lit guy, right? And he went to some very up their own arse schools and universities, and was a really good writer. Like, he did have a lovely way with words, very crisp, very precise, very journalistic. It's funny how the Read Some Effing Orwell people often tend to be journalists. What am I trying to say? I'm just going to start ranting if I'm not careful. He had a real bee in his bonnet about the right way to write and to use the English language, and he didn't like the way it kind of he didn't like the way it was kind of used in overly sort of formal, legalistic or political scenarios. He preferred like things which kind of combined the plainness of the common tongue with like vernacular spoken English with the kind of metaphorical reach of Shakespeare, right? Which is kind of almost like, I just think he was kind of tilting at windmills a bit. I just don't think that like the kind of like the lords and ladies that he was like implicitly attacking for using the language to kind of set educational boundaries, like about among accesses to power, so that like, lords and ladies would speak in a certain way and the proletariat wouldn't have a chance to engage with that system of power because they couldn't speak like that. In 1984, the sanitization of language into newspeak is a bad thing too. even though it kind of flattens out some of those power differentials. Uh, and you kind of, and I just can't quite see why. I think it's basically just a taste thing. I just think that Orwell hated the kind of legalistic precision of English formal speak, as well you might. But to kind of suggest like a better type of English, he wrote this big essay about it, didn't he? And indeed, like there's a big essay about it at the end of 1984. But I really think it's an aesthetic thing, and I think that like the crunching of language as it kind of moves from power to not power and back again, uh, creates interesting things, and does find expressive qualities that work for both sides. Really, like the evolution of the language and the kind of the refinement of it cascade from positions of power to not power and from not power to power upwards, and it's a dynamic process, right? I don't think it gets owned or controlled in the way that Orwell was worried about it being able to. Does that make sense? Anyway, the other side of this, all of that language shapes what you think stuff. This is like you know Alfred Korzybski. Do I mean Alfred Korzybski? No. uh Arthur Kiesler, Korzybski, can't remember his first name, uh via Robert Anton Wilson. This is all Robert Anton Wilson stuff that Morrison's just kind of regurgitating here. Albeit regurgitating it interestingly with the introduction of the key 17 injection, which neatly dramatizes the thing that Wilson was worried about, which was like language kind of putting you in a box, and uh, like kind of linguistic tricks, like the word is, and the verb to be, which is kind of like a philosophical abstraction inserted into language, which doesn't represent the fact that existence isn't a set of beings; it's a set of doings. Uh, uh, it's not as big of a problem as I think Wilson was worried about it being, and in fact, I think that the capacity of English of language per se to break by having confusions like is and do kind of both in it at the same time is why it's actually good, right? The flip side to all of this stuff about the alphabet being a demon of control that gets inserted into the child's brain is that it's actually really easy to break. And indeed, you see uh, King Mob attempting to break it by teaching himself to write with his left hand. Uh, when you were young, you spent hours writing with your left hand, didn't you? You were trying unconsciously to break the alphabet spell our teachers placed upon you. A brave and imaginative effort, my boy, but quite worthless. Um, is it though? Because it turned King Mob into a badass, and to use, I think it's Alistair Crowley's term, right? That magic is a disease of language. It's like it's through this demon of restriction and the places where you sort of pull his skin apart to create teratoma and pathologies of language where really special stuff can happen, right? Bum, 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 bum. So good on King Mob. Uh, there's another bit here, though, isn't there? Okay, so this. Sorry, let's just get to that. Let's just actually do the page before I get to what I think the other thing that's going on here is. Suddenly, so he writes 5 fingers on a piece of paper, shows King Mob, and suddenly his hand, in this really brilliantly drawn, really creepy way, has got 5 fingers, even though he's only holding up 4 still. King Mob can see 5, and and because you're so used to seeing hands with 4 fingers on them, uh, you could miss it really easily. But he's got, but Sir Miles's hand, from King Mob's viewpoint, has got 5 fingers on it. It looks really horrible. The bit that kind of sneaks under the radar in this page. Um, but where is it? There is a spell word, an abracadabra, implanted in the brain of every English-speaking child. The root mantra of restriction, the secret name of a mighty hidden demon. ABCD, FGH, the key bit here, especially as it relates to like an evolution of empire, as we go from flags and phalluses to desire to images, is an empire of language, I think. But so we are, so like Brexit deadline as of now, when I'm talking, Brexit deadline is approaching. The UK is going to be like stranded without any kind of formal trade deal agreements with the rest of the world, which a lot of people are kind of shitting themselves about. I think there could definitely be some weird price fluctuations down the supermarket, which I'm not too pleased about. But I do, like, literally today or yesterday, or maybe certainly this week, Canada said, "Yeah, we're cool, man." Like, they basically said, "We're going to we're going to keep trading with Britain on continuing terms." So the pardon me, the masses of trade that occurs between Britain and Canada, it's not that much, is going to be relatively unaffected by the change in Britain's like economic standing with the rest of the world, because the new empire is an anglophone one, right? That's what they've got in hand. All of the Great Reset stuff is all of the World Economic Forum stuff, all of the World Bank stuff, all of the IMF stuff that's coming together into Great Reset, cryptocurrency, like centralized cryptocurrency plus um, like the Navy, uh, kind of enforcing this new sort of digital abstracted technocratic dystopia upon the world. This is an Anglophone project. Although it keeps talking about how global it is, and in fact, and indeed, it does certainly overlap with, not all of the people involved in it speak English. It's basically Atlanticist in terms of it being about American and British and kind of North European wealth looking to rewrite the rules for the next 80 years in its own favor, right? Uh, the heart of that, the most kind of key thing to that is that, like, a war machine can only build itself out of the rubble of an old war machine. And the rubble of the old war machine that this new one is being built out of is basically the linguistic commonalities between Canada, the USA, Great Britain, um, New Zealand, and Australia. The what's it called? The five fingers. Is that right? Oh my god, five fingers. Uh, what's it called? The surveillance network agreement. What's that called? Five five leaves. Is it five leaves? Yeah. The kind of the information exchange that was revealed in the um in the Snowden files. Yeah, I'm not wrong about that. I don't think. I think that's right. I need to look that up. I can't believe I forgot my school. But as much as obviously this is it's not like, as much as the new economic dispensation for the 21st century is wants to have the whole globe in its reach. In reality, it's a project cooked up by, uh, if not English speaking people, but English speaking money, right? And that's going to be that's the thread that's going to kind of hook the new empire back with the old ones, is going to be the fact that it basically emanates from the economic hegemony of the English-speaking Atlanticist world. I don't know what the right word for it is. What right word for it is? Atlanticist is like the old one. It's like NATO, basically. Yeah. Uh, obviously the greatest sets of power in the modern world are kind of on the Pacific side of the globe, but in order, like, the big act of the big move against that obvious kind of shift of locus of power is this Great Reset malarkey, which is basically the Anglophone powers trying to reassert their dominance over the next 100 years, much as they had over the previous 100 years, right? That's what this English language demon of control is about. Is that like it's like the kind of the language that you speak and the kind of the tendency of Anglophone speakers to kind of eschew alternative languages. Uh, that's the root bit of control, and that's why England and Canada were like, yeah, cool, we'll just like our trade deal is going to stay the same. Uh, and yeah, like if you add up all of the naval power of the English speaking world, like China suddenly starts to look a little bit parochial, right? Because you got because those big like New Zealand and Australia being on the other side, being on the Pacific side of the globe, and yet firmly white. Let's be honest. Um, English speaking countries um, is a big fact for non English speaking powers on the Pacific side of the planet to worry about. Um, so yeah, so that's the line that the Great Reset is going to kind of emanate along. Is that the basic kind of um, in group thing there is are you speaking our language? Are you speaking English? Um, and that's huge. And I think that's what Samars is getting. I think that's as much as the Invisibles gives you tells you lots of stuff that's really interesting and kind of helps you think around the corners of things. The stuff that it's not really saying or is only saying obliquely is the stuff that we're really here for, right? That's the big conspiracy hiding under the little one. And that's what Bobsy thinks in November. Okay, God, we've got to crack along because we've been going for over an hour already, and we're only on page 8. Uh, so we've got more. So he bashes his way back after the little lecture. He kind of oh, hang on. And although you could think that King Bob's resolve is really beginning to break now, he doesn't say I can see five fingers, even though we've just seen that he can. He's not done, King Bob. He knows that uh, he's being drugged into seeing five fingers, or at least he's like he knows that people don't have five fingers on their hand. So he's and a minute ago it was only four. So he's not, although he's kind of had a very brutal demonstration of the power of language that Samars has just taken him through, he doesn't say, I can see five fingers because he can't, because he knows he can't. Um, and that's part of just King Bob's general, I'm actually a superhero ness that he didn't kind of give in there. So Sir Miles goes back into King Mob's mind. He sees this big metaphor. It's a door with a Scorpio symbol on it, and Sir Miles is like, "Aha! The big secret is there. He'll once I can break through this door, he'll tell me everything." Hasn't quite worked out that it's just doors yet. Um, King Mob shaving his head. King Mob shaving his head and going back to the presumably back to the ashram, although I think it's a different one. I think he has two really good backpacking trips, two great gap years. Um, this one is like an obvious, like we're learning kung fu, and it looks exactly like a scene from the movie, from the TV show Kung Fu. Um, this is lovely. This one, the way that it has all of these roses just kind of floating around it, and the way that they may be actually in the panel, but probably aren't because I don't really see how they could be, and are just kind of an effective King Mob's meditational practice, which is that he's just making roses appear, which is lovely. And then he's got a blindfold and he's fighting a woman with cropped silver hair. There is a man named Al Fayed who we know about and who we've met. Like Samars is getting quite close to a lot of King Mob's personal knowledge here, and that's not great for the Invisibles. We need the location for this place, Franklin. This is where they train their soldiers. This is where you wear a blindfold and are still really goddamn good at kung fu. Over the page, on we've got another ad break. It's for Primus Tales from the Punch Bowl, an enhanced CD. I didn't go and look at the enhanced CD and the amusing 1996 computer graphics, which would no doubt be on it. But I fucking hated this. Imagine like Zappa. Imagine Zappa, but ashamed of his intellect. Oh, it was, it was, oh, it was horrible. I really hated it. I really hated it. Uh, yeah, just kind of just like sneering Whereas like with Zappa, there's this kind of obviously there's a great amount of disdain in his work, but he is kind of probing it, and he is kind of like, he's trying to construct something better. Whereas this is just like using complicated musical signatures as a kind of a massive like uh kind of not just as a fuck you, but as a you're all dicks and so is this. I felt really bummed out by it. It was so nihilistic and like twiddly for its own sake, by a bunch of guys who were uh, sort of who were sort of ashamed of their musical intellectualism, if you liked, who were like wanted to play wanted to play like really fiddly sort of grooveless white prog, um, but also kind of be like, oh, this is rubbish about it because they just are incapable of like um, loving things. I hated it. I really hated it. I really hate Primus. It's the first I've ever heard, and I hated it. Apart from the fact that they're on, they do the music for South Park, right? So that you know tells you what you need to know. Over in Sam Goody Music Land, we have the album's breathe. Even the graphic design on this one isn't very good. We have the album "Breathe" by Loud Lucy, and we have the album "Hello" by Poe. Loud Lucy Breathe is just absolute landfill grunge. Um, quiet bit, quiet bit, quiet bit, loud bit, loud bit, loud bit, quiet bit, quiet bit, quiet bit, loud bit, loud bit, loud bit. Just rubbish. Hated it. And Poe Hello is even worse. Sort of like girl vocals, breathy trip hop, like really flat break beats with uh like annoying like sort of like ethereal rapping on it, like a bit like Luscious Jackson or something, but like just awful, like really leaden and boring, and the rapping is, or the kind of the rhythmic singing is bad. I hated it. Okay, more of King Mob doing this training. He's doing this really cool bit of kung fu. He is walking barefoot in a saffron robe, uh, up a very narrow, backwards, blindfolded, up a very narrow pathway. I mean, it looks really difficult when you look at it like this, but in reality, especially if you're blindfolded, the blindfolding is going to make it easier almost. You just keep your shoulder pressed against the wall, right? And just inch backwards. Like if you could see, and you were constantly being freaked out by how high up you were, then it would be really hard. But if you've just got a blindfold on and it's like, well, all I've got to do is keep my right shoulder pressed against the wall and shuffle backwards slowly, then, I'm not saying it'd be easy peasy, but it's not that hard. Like, do you know what I mean? Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but kind of like karmically, there's a scorpion on the path that you can see here. So he can't see, and he accidentally. And this is where it does get quite nasty. He gets stung on the heel by a scorpion, and is like, "Ow! I've been stung by a scorpion," and kind of has to sort of lie down on this very narrow ledge. That's where it would get quite scary. But again, I mean, I don't. I mean, I'd be tempted to take the blindfold off at that point. But I'd be like, "Ow, okay, all right, time out, game over. I failed." Um, yeah, he steps on the scorpion and kills it. There is a death in this issue. The poor scorpion dies, but as it dies, it stings him, and he kind of has this. This is like the moment. This is like the moment of initiation that he's been waiting for. It. He has this vision while he's up very high on the ledge and dealing with all of the scorpion poison in his ankle, and he has this cool vision of like, well, how does someone else describe it? Entities, presences, the drumbeats of assassin gods. They've come to teach me the thing. It's horrible. It's horrible. I think it probably is horrible. They're showing me how to destroy souls. Uh, so I think that this is a soul. Obviously, it looks a bit like King Mob's soul. Also, looks a lot like the Silver Surfer. Heavy Kirby stuff going on here. Also, this like drawing of the auras is great. Absolutely like, um, you know, early theosophical sort of like pencil drawings of where your soul was and where your souls were and how they kind of emanated out of you not what's the word I'm looking for? What's the photography? Curlian energy waves, right? Uh, and then he's kind of like doing naked kung fu at it with scorpion aura on him. Uh, and it is badass. It's very Kirby-esque, very Jack Kirby. I think. I don't know why, but it's because it's the Silver Surfer. That's why I think it's Kirby-esque. The Curlian lines around him even look like a surfboard. What's happening here? Show me, damn you! He's still doing the mind meld. Samars is still well at him. Over the page. Oh God, I don't know if I'm going to get through this episode. I'm going to stop at 2 hours, right? So we've got 3/4 of an hour to go, and we're less than halfway through. We've got this big sequence here of Jim Crow, Boy, a Raven, I think, and Robin talking about rescuing Sir Miles. He's got a hearse that he drives around in called the Chromobile. Uh, he must have bought it in London, though, right? He works for a. He's in a. When I talk about his band, uh, but he's only at a hip hop band isn't going to ship over their car. That would be really expensive. Even in the 90s, there wasn't that much free cash flying around. Um, so I think he's. So I like to think that somebody in London, or in fact, the first thing he does when he steps down in any new country, is for Jim Crow, famous root doctors, hip hop megastar, to uh, go and buy a hearse. uh, he's got a hearse in every port. Um, and he has a bit of a line about how hiding in plain sight. We the Invisibles were meant to be low profile, and he's like, "Not me, sister." Uh, I love the people of London here, kind of like looking at the crazy hip hop hearse. Uh, we have like, yeah, we have like a Bobby on the beat, like a young woman kind of with like 60s kinky boots and like a tartan skirt on, and a boy wearing dungarees. He looks a bit like Orwell, I suppose that's who he's meant to be. Uh, and a man wearing a pretentious man bag, which yes, yes, I will. And then these kind of like punk goth, um, ashes to ashes extras, new romantics kind of lined up behind in this scene here. This shot of what looks like Regent Street. The details on this are really nice. But basically, they're going to rescue. Basically, they're going to rescue King Mob. The gang, the cavalry is getting together in this bit. Um, they talk about the methods they're going to use to do it, and Ragged Robin asks, "Does that sound plausible?" And Boy says, "Plausible, like Michael and Lisa Marie being in love is plausible, but I guess we don't have much choice, do we?" So Michael Jackson and Elvis Presley's daughter Lisa Marie got married around this time, right? That was weird, isn't it? Oh, good. Uh, yeah. Let's not get into that. Well, I mean, I think we might have another chance to talk about Michael Jackson at some other point. Um, yeah, they're having trouble looking for King Mob using their like psychic signal because, as we know, King Mob's full of like psychic defenses. Over the page. So we're cutting now between Fanny's cell and King Mob's cell. Uh, Fanny is still playing with the handkerchief voodoo doll that she's made of Sir Miles. Oh, spoilers, sorry, but that happens here. Um, uh, Sir Miles is like, I'm about to break down. So it's interesting. So they're at the point of victory. Sir Miles thinks he's about to break through this wall with the Scorpio sign on it in King Mob's mind. He's just found out his training and has found out that actually he was trained in some quite weird shit that he doesn't really understand. Should have been a bit of an alarm bell. Uh, and then he's like, okay. And then Samaz is like, okay, I'm literally going to go in for the final thing and smash down the door and find out what King Mob's ultimate secret is. Just as he does that, Fanny twists the Sir Miles handkerchief, voodoo doll, and he goes, ah! That fucks him up, obviously. And it's great because we're seeing Fanny using very like direct and instantaneously paying off Malefica at this point is like, oh, okay, yeah, she's not just like she's not just like a witch insofar as she like, you know, puts on her witch armor and becomes very glamorous for an evening. She like she could definitely do it, right? With immediate payoff. And so King Mob gets a nasty jolt here as his being is kind of abruptly twisted by this very powerful bruja, and the wall of the door, the Scorpio door in Samar's head, and King Mob's head starts to collapse. Oh no, the wall's falling, but I don't think I didn't make it fall. And it's like it's not. Down. Oh no! And this is the table turn. It happens literally halfway through the issue. These are the staples on page 13. Bad luck for Sir Miles. Um, Basically, Fanny and King Mob both attack Sir Miles at the same time. Is what's happening, because the Invisibles surf serendipity in a way which the tight and predictable control structures that Sir Miles worships can't really cope with. And there's a great line from this scorpion inside who was behind the wall. You could have worked that out, right? That there was a scorpion behind the wall with the big Scorpio symbol on it. The scorpion gods taught me psychic martial arts techniques, Samos. They taught me how to make mind traps convincing enough to fool any smart-ass telepathic intruder. Mind traps like the one you're in now. West London accent, it's not too bad. It's all right. And that's not all. King Mob's awake. They taught me how to do this. Wow, high fantasy. So in the room, strapped to the chair still, uh, King Mob manifests this kind of scorpion armor, psychic scorpion armor again. The stinger is poised right above Sir Miles, and you can hear, and then this is nicely done, where something terrible happens to Sir Miles here, and it's real enough to make Franklin kind of flinch in his arms and his coat billow. But we don't see what it is, though it's obviously not very nice. And Sir Miles is kind of looks physically unhurt, but collapses, and he's kind of squirming around on the floor. Franklin, help me! But uh, it's all over basically. Some King Mob is controlling Sir Miles's mind now. Gets He undoes the chains in the chair, and Franklin's like, "What are you doing? Don't let him loose!" And bosh, Franklin, our horrible, grown-up hippie, evil doctor guy, gets the bash in the face that we've been waiting for him to have with his horrible "No, I'm still cool" hair. Gets bashed in the face very satisfyingly. Uh, Fanny, back in her room, throws away the doll, the handkerchief doll, because that's kind of done. Uh, she turns her attention to the guard in the room. She manages to kind of like psychically undo him with a little bit of jiggery pokery. Quite soon on this page, the following page, which is page 17, the Invisibles are using their kind of psychic. They're all standing on roofs in different parts of London, using some kind of psychic triangulation to find where King Mob is. Great shot. If I was a bit more good at my research, okay, so you can kind of work this out. So so I don't know where that is. Where's that? That feels like it could be. So basically, so you can see the river there, right in this corner, and you can see St Paul's there. So we can see that Jim Crow is standing east of St Paul's. Uh, I don't think this view works. I think as much as I like this kind of, it looks like it's been done with a light box or whatever, background of London here. I think, wouldn't he, like, where's the city? Where are the skyscrapers? Is what I'm saying here with this picture. I think either they're just literally off panel here on the particular angle. I don't really think so. I think they should be about here. Uh, don't know though. Yeah, where is he? He's in. He could be like Jim Crow could be. No, it's not. He's too far away from St. Paul's. I was going to say he could be like literally stood above the stock exchange or something like that, but it's not there. Stock exchange is more like around here. Um, I don't know. I might go and look that up now. Actually, might have like watch this space. I might do a little bit of A to Zing and see if I can work out where uh, Jim Crow must be in this panel. Anyway, over the other page, the Fighting American Boys Ranch and Comic Book Makers advert that we've been through a couple of times. I won't look at that again. I think this is the first time that we've noticed these kind of unpleasant like stretch marks or tightening creases that Jim's extravagant skull codpiece makes on his jeans. Um, but he gets out of London A to Z. Oh, I just said A to Z, didn't I? And he uses his hat pin and the crow to kind of just like he closes his eyes and goes ping through the map. And that's where King Mob is because they've been doing some psychic triangulation. I love all of the kind of the way that they like X-Men up these, pretty simple sort of like folk magic-y sort of techniques and update them, but also kind of make them urban fantasy in a way which kind of feels very much of a piece. The whole like all of this kind of psychic armor. This is just the X-Men. It's just an X-Men comic come to life and transposed into like edgy Britpop London. And the comic, frankly, works really well at this point. All these bits are like, yeah, a cool story here. It's cool. It's good fun. Uh, he speaks like, Jim Crow speaks to the crow. The crow speaks back. That would make sense. Or I guess it's a raven, is it? Yeah, ravens, Tower of London. No, it's got a yellow beak though. So like what, a blackbird? It's definitely not a blackbird. It's what you do. Yeah, it's just a bit of dodgy art. Franklin's been bashed in the face. Goes for a gun on the table. Gets a scalpel right through his third eye for his problems. Get that stitched. Oh, you're what? Oh, you're what? I might start doing King Mob's voice like that. Oh, what? Maybe King Mob has got more in common with Phil Mitchell than we thought. So Samars is all fucked up, but King Mob has escaped, but he has been shot in the stomach, remember? Like, I know it was like 6 months ago or whatever that he was shot in the stomach, but he is still in in really bad physical shape. But he gets the gun from Franklin. Samars is crying, and he's not in a good way. And King Mob says, Samar says, "You can kill me if you like. It won't make any difference." And King Mob goes, "I already killed you. I ripped off your aura." That's what the scorpion thing was. Ripped off his aura. Sounds sore, doesn't it? So he's already dead. But it's just kind of not yet. And obviously, there's this look of fear and disorientation in Samars's face, which is really good, and it's very, very different to any face expression that we've seen him pull before. Even when he was kind of scared from the Archon and stuff, and he was bleeding out of his eyes or whatever, he didn't look bewildered before, and now he does, and that seems to be a very unpleasant emotion for Sir Miles. And he turns the tables on him. How many fingers am I holding up? Just two, you old bastard. This gives him the V's. Is this a point to talk about the V's? I can't really be bothered. I think there's definitely people sticking their V's up at later points in Invisibles, so I think we'll have a chance to talk about it down the line. It's a wonderful Britishism. You don't see much of it anymore. When people stick their V's up, they tend to be people my age being a bit retro. Because the American middle finger has kind of taken over. It makes you proud. It's one of the few things that make you proud to be British is the V's. Uh, Agincourt, Creasy, World War II. We love to give the V's. King Mob. I keep saying King Mob when I mean Samars, or Samars when I mean King Mob. Maybe that says something meaningful. King Mob busts out the cell. He collapses though because he is still in a really bad way. But there's a guard here. points his gun. It's not a gun, it's Fanny. Hooray! She's escaped as well. He's escaped at the same time. The tables are turned, guys. The Invisibles are on the loose. It's great. Over on the page, there's an advert for Batman Forever, which is the first of the Joel Schumacher ones, I think. Yeah, the first of the Joel. Yep. Chris O'Donnell, Val Kilmer, Tommy Lee Jones, Jim Carrey, Nicole Kidman, Chris O'Donnell. Still the only time we've seen Robin in one of the films. A truly unlikable acting presence, Chris O'Donnell. Rubbish Robin. Nicole Kidman. She's Nicole Kidman. Tommy Lee Jones. He was in. He obviously plays the marshal in The Fugitive, and and his turn in JFK is worth a watch for like a guy who I don't think is gay acting like an evil gay man. It's really like it's quite a shocker. And Jim Carrey, who would make a film called The Number 23. I don't want to talk about this. To dig into how Batman Forever is relevant to the stuff that we've got going on in the rest of this issue is a stretch that even I can't be bothered to make, to be honest. But now I've said that, maybe I'll try. What is really interesting is that there's this kind of pay-per-view thing. So this is the year's biggest hit, but they're already pushing it through to the telly. So I guess it came out in the movies a few months ago, but not very long ago, and maybe they're trying to push it to pay-per-view prior to its release on VHS, right? Oh, sorry, on video, on home video. Americans didn't have VHS. But then they're also packaging it up with a promotion with Six Flags theme parks. Order Batman Forever on pay-per-view and save up to $40 on admission to Six Flags theme parks. I don't know what Six Flags is. Maybe I should look it up. Six Flags theme parks. They sound like a cheap jack Disney, don't they? Disney. It's like Alton Towers or something, but American. The Batman Forever Batmobile car is quite cool. We have just had them talking about the Chromobile. Oh, that's the link, isn't it? So back on these pages, the hearse that Jim Crow has to buy every time he goes on tour is the redesigned Batmobile. So the Chromobile is the Batmobile. Okay, that's interesting. Look at the page. Fanny and King Mob in the corridor, sort of catching up. There's a cool bit where a guard comes along and is like, "Oi!" And quick as a flash, even though he's really fucked up, quick as a flash, King Mob just puts two in his dome straight away. Like he's very badly wounded, very, very dangerous still. A bit like Batman. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's quite a lot of Batman in this issue. Here's Robin. Oh no, Robin's the other one. That's a shame. Oh god, am I going to have to do this? Okay, so we've got Batman, Robin, Dr. Chase. What's Nicole Kidman's character in Batman Forever? Dr. Chase. Dr. Chase. Quite a cool name. Two-Face and the Riddler. So if King Mob is Batman and Ragged Robin is Robin, Jim Crow is represented by the Chromobile Batmobile. The Riddler is probably... Oh, okay, so Dr. Chase is a doctor, so she's Dr. Frankland. Two-Face is kind of, playing with binaries of identity. So I'm really sorry if this comes across as offensive to anyone, but let's say that Fanny is Two-Face, and the Riddler, who's left in the issue, who we haven't... Boy, that doesn't work at all, does it? Question marks. It doesn't work. Let's stop forcing it. Bang, bang, da-da-da, and he goes... And obviously, remember, like, a couple of issues ago, maybe just last issue, when Miles put the words "diseased face" on a mirror and showed it to King Mob, and King Mob was like, "Oh," that was probably he definitely seemed pretty upset at that point. The first thing he says to Fanny when he sees somebody he can trust is, "How's my face? How's my face?" And she's like, "Oh well, you're a bit beaten up, but you're okay." And he's like, "Oh, thank God for that. I don't think I could bear to die ugly," because he's still very shallow. Remember. Um, okay, now obviously there's not been much Gideon Stargrave in this episode because I think it's sort of I think the idea sort of worked itself out. Oh, that's something I meant to say earlier. I think a lot of the scenes in King Mob's mind, Imaginarium here, are specifically this bit. This bit rang a bell with me, and I couldn't think why. But I think some of these features and scenes are scenes from the Gideon Stargrave comics that Grant Morrison put out when he was younger. I think that's where some of the iconography and bric-a-brac in this scene comes from. Okay, so there hasn't been much Gideon Stargrave apart from that kind of little nod, perhaps, at him. And then we have this kind of apocalyptic hanged man Odin thing, where Gideon Stargrave is basically says, he's hanging upside down off this wonderful electricity pylon, and when he gets down, is there his like hot sister is there, and he says that was my vision. So he's done the hangman thing. Um, Somewhere in the distance, the world's great cities are burning like birthday candles. Gideon Stargrave's Odin trip, 9 days and nights hung like a tarot card, a ritual sacrifice to himself, has borne fruit. Working class messiah, crowned and conquering pin-up boy of the Aeon with no name, Stargrave rises to meet the flaming dawn. That was weird. That was weird. I thought it was somewhere being tortured. I suppose that's the sort of thing what happens when you hang upside down from an electricity pylon for 9 days. So it's kind of just like a cheeky valediction, really, to Gideon Stargrave. Final kind of like scene from a Moorcock novel, but it gives us a cheeky little sting in the tail bit. Sting in the tail. There's been a lot of sting in the tail in this episode. Sting in the tail bit where he kind of goes, maybe King Mob's world and our world, by analogy, are his fantasies. Or maybe the membrane between fantasy and reality is thin enough that they can look back at us. Plink, nice and smooth. Stargrave farts like Gabriel's trumpet. Love, pop, fashion, magic. A new and tasty world rises from its bloody birth fluids, opens its eyes, blinks and grins. Nice and smooth. Clink to chaos. I don't know. Am I an idiot for thinking that's really cool? Maybe I am. Maybe I don't care. Oh, we're on to the final page already. I think we're going to make it, guys. Okay, so this is good. I think we'll talk a bit more about this in a couple of episodes' time. But this, and to be honest, I think it's a bit rushed, this page, and I don't think the design that they kind of come out with is quite as strong as it could be, because she looks a bit too much just like a Dalek robot or something. There's definitely something a bit Davros-y about her face. But this is like the first like intrusion of like viral biology, I'm gonna say, relevant to 2020 in the comic, I think, in the Invisibles, and it's definitely a thing, right? Because remember, the computer age or the internet age was just about to start, and this concept of computer viruses, which was an illness that your computer could catch, but also viruses as being a model for the way that information could flow through, digitally networked systems, was a thing. So that's why every episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which came out around this time, um, is about viral patterns, and they've got to defeat computer viruses every week. It's a virus in the computer. Number one. Number one. There's a virus in the computer. So Miss Dwyer, who's very bright, is kind of using her psychic powers, or maybe just her ears, given that there have been gunshots fired and stuff, to work out that there's something wrong in the other room. The King of All Tears is kind of like leering over her shoulder. and this cool thing happens. Look, and oh yeah, look, her kind of boots are a bit Batman-y, aren't they? Oh, and this black liquid armor carapace thing looks a lot like the design of the Batman Forever Batmobile. See, look at me. I was really dismissive of this advert, and actually, it's the most important one in the whole issue. Am I going to read this out? I don't know. I'm going to read it out. We've got 20 minutes, and I've just got to do the letters page. So let's read this out. Okay. So this is what's happening, because I think it sort of explains itself, right? And I think it sort of explains how. I think I said earlier on that like the coronavirus eats time, and I meant that kind of semi literally, and this is kind of this kind of like sort of like abstract Burroughsian speed poetry that was a really big thing in British comics at the time, in which I have a real soft spot for, as kind of as kind of as bad as it can often be. Um, uh, it kind of explains how viruses can eat things, right? Okay, not just eat them, but kind of reprogram them. Something's wrong in the other room, she says, her voice quiring and crackling like bee radio, hissing syllables of cold static, weaving oral cobwebs, corrosive nets of anti-speech, viral mantras which dissolve flesh or trigger irreversible brain damage. The king of all tears howls, summoning his weapons, his cloaks of inks, his neuroworm larvae and nanofactories, and the nest of razors in her womb. Ouch. Which is maybe a literal thing, right? Maybe that's part of the modification process that she had to go through. Lots of razors in her womb. Ouch. This all just kind of sounds like sort of glib, fast, invisible style throwaway stuff. But if you think about it a bit, it's quite horrible. I think this whole section is worth taking slowly, even though I'm not going slowly now. And the nest of razors in her womb coils sharply. Hypodermic implants irrigate her with seething liquid macro-intelligence. She interfaces with superdimensional libraries of vast and immaculate hatred. The bone hooks between her legs clash and bite eagerly. That last couple of lines is written in a different typeface to the rest. It was sort of implying that it was edited hastily and rewritten. Not necessarily rewritten by Morrison, but like rewritten by an editor, perhaps, or But the letterer had to write that again. Who's the letterer? We didn't even do the credits. Sorry. King Mob in Entropy in the UK, Part 3 Assassin. Grant Morrison writer, Phil Jimenez penciler, John Stokes inker, Daniel Vozzo colours, Clem Robbins letterer. So Clem Robbins had to rewrite that line a couple of times, you can tell. Julie Rottenberg, associate editor, Stuart Moore, editor. The Invisibles created by Grant Morrison. Sorry for not doing that earlier. Her armor fast breeding down through microscopic breaches in the reality grid. Crawling bacterial possession, ectoplasmic parasites condensing to matte black shockproof skin. Soft valves and tubes penetrate her, dissolve her to a mollusk curled in a shell of super adaptive antimaterial. Soldier nun of the Order of Fevers, prioress of the Outer Church. I think that's the first time we've heard the words Outer Church. And the baddies, sorry, spoilers, jumping ahead, the baddies in the Invisibles, who I've just been calling the baddies, or the forces of control, or Smiles, or the upper class, or whatever, they're called the Outer Church. Yeah, the Outer Church are the baddies, and the Invisibles are the goodies. Or are they? Okay, prioress of the Outer Church, the Cold Church, the barren altar, wedded to nothing. Castrated woman, demoness, Kali unbound, Miss Dwyer, dressed for the hunt. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit cringe, that whole bit, but I really like it. There's something about bodies and languages and viruses. And remember how, like, the language stuff that we were talking about earlier, and I was saying how the way that it breaks is the most kind of interesting and potent thing about it. Uh, the baddies know that and use it to turn you into an evil Doctor Who baddie. Uh, and we're learning. I mean, it's because it's also sort of, because like so much is happening at once. It's quite, and because Miss Dwyer is such like a baddie, um, you learn a little bit about the process that she's being subjected to, and it's quite hard not to be a little bit sympathetic towards her after that point. Although you don't, it doesn't really come across in the book because the the fact that it's kind of inserted into this mesh of like nonsense um, makes it hard to kind of credit. Um, but yeah, if you kind of if you take it slowly, then yeah, Miss Dwyer has kind of been tortured into this shape. Uh, yeah, and she's got this cool armor at the end, and it's kind of, in the armor is somehow, the way that her Lennons are just, uncolored, are just pure black spaces and are just flat. And then she sort of moves to take them off, so the flat becomes 3D. There's a nice kind of, uh, the language of the page breaks nicely there, as that goes from being a flat shape to a one that the text can interact with, and that feels like what's happening to her as well, right? That's also why these really dense, packed captions with this, outre language style uh, suddenly sort of start to happen on this page. It's a shame. This page feels a bit, not rushed, but it just feels like it would have been nicer to have this happen more slowly. But yeah, basically the goodies have escaped, but now and it looked like Sir Miles and Dr. Franklin were the baddies for the past 3 issues that they had to beat, and indeed they were. But now they've got evil Cyberman woman and the King of All Tears are literally in the next room, and that's who the baddies are now. So the stakes have been accelerated really well, and that's the end of. Well, it's not the end of the show, but that's the end of King Mob's origin story, and there's loads more to be getting on with, right? Exciting stuff. Obviously, this isn't the last we've seen of her. Maybe the way that, like, yeah, maybe like language virus, and biology, and identity. We're gonna talk about that a bit more a bit later. Okay, we're on to the letters page. Invisible ink. This is Morrison's kind of intro. It breaks my heart to say goodbye to Phil and John, but this is their last issue for a while. Unless perhaps you inundate us with a Bible-style flood of tear-stained letters demanding their return for a longer gig, as today's rock musician might put it. They do come back. They do the first several issues of book 2, which are some of the best issues. And indeed, for him and his art is great, and it's wonderful. I'm writing this 2 days after Thanksgiving. Ooh, that's weird. So I'm recording this. I don't know. I don't really care when Thanksgiving is. It was either yesterday or it's like in a couple of days' time. But it's Thanksgiving week this week, and this bit is written. So I've kind of caught up with myself, having been really lazy about how many shows I've done this year. Thanks for bearing with. I'm writing this 2 days after Thanksgiving, so it's still too early to tell if the sigil worked. So he's referring to the sigil that he told everybody to wank to a couple of months ago, even though that was published out of sequenced from when it should have been. Other late breaking news: my bacterially savaged face is healing miraculously. Where does all that living tissue come from to seal up such a huge hole? You must think that certain questions, this is about tissue being made by language too, right? All of this stuff that's happening to Miss Dwyer. And he's here ruminating on the fact that he had a hole, an abscess in his cheek, right? He was talking about that before. Um, he's got 2 new kittens. That's lovely. Yet unnamed. They've reached that particularly amusing stage in infant cat development where they try to act tough by constantly arching their backs and hopping sideways. All very charming if you happen to be a cat lover, I'm sure, but sickening for the rest of you. So I'll try to curb my gushing and get on with it. Loads of great letters as usual. Here are some of them. Oh, well, I mean, that's a nice little intro, isn't it? That's great. Da, 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 da. It sounds like you've read, like, this is from Julian Ernst of Akron, Ohio. Ba 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 ba. It sounds like you've read a lot into the Temple of Psychic Youth? Question mark. I've noticed how you've been using the number 23 in a lot of the stories. It's strange how often the fucking number pops up. Did I say that earlier about the Temple of Psychic Youth becoming landlords? It's true, they're just stories. Um, I will try my damnedest to get as many of my friends in to read The Invisibles. I have a lot of friends into the Temple of Psychic Youth, Psychic TV, drugs, counterculture, revolution, etc. Drugs, revolution, counterculture. Oh yeah, is J.M. DeMatteis cool? J.M. DeMatteis is the guy who writes Seeker into Mysteries, the kind of Invisibles for boring people that who wrote the On the Ledge column a few weeks back, right? A few episodes back. Uh, da, 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 da. And okay, and in his response, how because it's interesting, right? I'm writing this 2 days after So this I'm just repeating. This is the bit that Morrison said in his intro just a second ago. I'm writing this 2 days after Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was when they did this sigil wank. So it's still too early to tell if it worked, except that I already feel sure that it has. And then in his response to this next question from Julian Ernst, who likes Psychic TV, as I mentioned last issue, I'll be doing a couple of mainstream DC Universe books. And that's as I explained before, that's the answer to the sigil. So it was actually in process before the sigil happened. Funny how that works. He talks about Flex Mentalo, his next Flex Mentalo. Don't really know how you're supposed to say it. Coming out soon, which I used to really like, and then they recolored it, and I don't like it as much anymore. I haven't read a lot of Temple stuff. I'm aware of Genesis P. Origin, his ideas, mainly via interviews, but I've no idea how the Temple of Psychic Youth has evolved without him. The sigil method, as I'm familiar with it, was developed by occultist and artist Austin Osman Spare, 1888 to 1956, and passed through the Chaos Current by Pete Carroll and Ray Sherwin in the early 80s, which is where King Mob was in Leeds, right? I don't know DeMatteis well enough to be able to rate him on the cool scale. It's a nice diplomatic answer. I don't know DeMatteis well enough to be able to rate him on the cool scale, Julian, so I guess you'll have to read some of his comics to find out. The bands I dig currently are all British and American guitar pop groups who sound just like the Beatles. My taste is simple and proletarian. Thanks for everything else. Next question from, next letter from Eric W. Lehman, address unknown. That's the way you do it, Eric. Smart man. What's his name? Okay. Sort of. Yeah, sort of. People are responding to his, basically in this issue, in this letters page, people are responding to him having asked them to beat themselves off in the name of magic with the sigil issue, right? And he goes, well, what, he just want a better comic? Which gives Morrison kind of a, what is better? Brian McNeil from Norwalk, Connecticut. Da, 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 da. Yeah, again, you're doing what? Yeah, boring, not in that. Dexter Midnight, cool name, from Rochester, NY. This is one of the most mature. It's funny how, it's funny how I really like it. It's mature. Because they like stuck mature readers labels on comics. Mature became like this weird like brand of comic, which basically just meant comics with swearing and maybe a drawing of some tits in it occasionally. And to be mature was good because you weren't an idiot reading superhero comics. You were an idiot reading mature comics. The Invisibles can't be cancelled. This is one of the most mature, comprehensive, compelling comics being published. Da, 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 da. In the same way, and this is Morrison's response, right? In the same way that Sandman is supported by a largely non-comics reading audience of people who wear black and get called names every time they go to the mall, I'm sure the Invisibles could become the Bible for America's legion of rabid, gun-toting, survivalist, paranoid patriots, for example. Seriously, though, ordering the comic through your dealer is a good move. They're still talking about like ways to raise the comic readership. But that's Is that prophetic? The Invisibles could become the Bible for America's legion of rabid, gun-toting, survivalist, paranoid patriots, for example. Did Grant Morrison invent QAnon with those words? Remember QAnon? They were a thing a couple of weeks ago, weren't they? Yeah, and then a guy called Kimball from Rochester, NY. So between Dexter Midnight and Kimball, there's a lot of Invisibles readers in Rochester. Instead of having everyone bob their baloney on Thanksgiving, how about putting some pussy in the book? That'll get you 6,000 readers back. Blah, blah, blah. And then Morrison kind of writes an answer. It's not very funny. Next issue. A nice normal person tells her nice normal life story. It's Boy's turn in the spotlight as we return to her days with the NYPD in How I Became Invisible. Boy used to be a cop, and we're going to get her origin story. How I Became Invisible by me. That's not me. That's Grant Morrison. And Tommy Lee Edwards, who is Two-Face. Tommy Lee Edwards, Tommy Lee Jones. But so we've had two Tommy Lees in this episode: Tommy Lee Edwards and Tommy Lee Jones, and Pamela Anderson. A little bit of a hinteroonie at the pornification to come, right? Okay, so the On the Ledge column is written by Timothy Truman. I'm fortunate enough to be. He's writing about Dark Moon. Dark Moon. Dark Moon is, did I mention this last time? It's like the guy from the Grateful Dead. MK Ultra MK Ultra alert warning. A warning. Has written a comic with Timothy Truman. If you know music, the work is called Dogmoon. This is from the On the Ledge comment by Timothy Truman. The work is called Dogmoon, a 64-page book published this month by Vertigo. The writer is Robert Hunter. If you know music, you'll already know Hunter's work, along with writers like Bob Dylan, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, the band's Robbie Robertson, and a few others. He gave poetry to rock music, taking it beyond the simplistic boy meets girl themes that dominated the lyrics of rock and roll's seminal generation. He was in the Grateful Dead, right? What has long set Hunter's work apart from that of his peers is his sense of storytelling. His lyrics often lyrics. I like the word lyrics. Often show that Hunter is a man looking for seedy, too human outlaws to whom he can pay honor. There is precious little tie-dye or flower power in Bob's writing. His are tales of knife-toting jailbreakers, murderous and murdered card sharks, striking miners, lost tribes, saints, rum runners, and territory rangers. I once told Hunter that he writes the most violent stories I've ever read or heard. He said, "Thanks." Dogmoon is a genre-bending horror story, plain and simple. A tale of two truck-driving soul trackers whose job is to search for the dead folks who wander the desert as food for dark, winged creatures of the night. Dogmoon is a tale of... it just sounds... I don't know. I don't know. I am taking the piss out of it, but I've almost convinced myself that it sounds good. It's taken me most of 1995 to adapt and illustrate Dogmoon. It was a strange year for Bob and me. A lot of folks we knew died, and not many were born. When did Zappa die? Is that weird that he popped up, or that I decided to invoke him to slag off Primus? When did Frank Zappa die? Oh, 1993. Okay. I don't know who from the Grateful Dead or their large circle died in 1995. My heart goes out to them. Okay, anyway, yeah, I'm not going to read Dogmoon. It sounds... I'm not into it. I'm not into the Grateful Dead, and I'm not into them writing comics about the desert in the West. I'm not into that. Okay, so coming out from Vertigo Comics this year, this month, you could in 1995 you could read blah 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 issue 100 of Hellblazer. Don't think I've ever read that. Dogmoon. It just sounds like a band, an album by a band that you wouldn't listen to, right? Like the Grateful Dead, in fact. The Invisible, Sandman Mystery Theatre, Shade the Changing Man. What's going on in Shade? Industrial God. Yeah, I mean, you know. Swamp Thing number 165. When lovable hipster Chester Williams forsakes his left-wing past for the life of a New York City cop, the powers that be decide he's just the man to talk the Swamp Thing out of his environmentally conscious plans for humankind. So that's quite good. So, like, Chester is the Grateful Dead-inspired hippie from Swamp Thing. Mark Millar's take on it was to turn him right-wing. A little bit of prophecy there. For Mark Miller, I mean, not for Chester Williams, who is a fictional guy who wasn't really right-wing. But yeah, turning left-wing things right-wing. Mark Miller comics. Seekers of the Mystery Death retail poster. This beautiful 4-color poster reprints new painted art by definitive death artist Chris Bucklow. Dog Moon retail tattoos. A set of 4 colors temporary tattoos reproducing the haunting painted art of Dog Moon artist Timothy Truman, and a Hellblazer retail pin. This quality crafted pin, I wonder if they mean like a pin badge with like a backing to it or just like a badge. This quality crafted pin features a smoky 4-color image of John Constantine by Hellblazer artist Sean Phillips. A Vertigo event coming next month. Vertigo Verite, a powerful new line of comics grounded firmly in the real world, yet infused with the unique variety of individual attitudes and perspectives for which Vertigo has become known. I've just noticed I've gone past 2 hours. Hang on. Vertigo Verite, the system number 1 of 3. A sleazy stockbroker is lining his pockets. A corrupt cop is shaking down drug dealers. A bomber is setting the timer. A serial killer is slaughtering strippers. A political scandal is brewing. The planet's burning, and nobody's talking. A 3-issue wordless miniseries, oh goodness, created and fully painted by award-winning illustrator Peter Cooper, which will prove why Rolling Stone magazine chose Cooper as 1995's hot comic book artist. Vertigo Verite 7 miles a second, the gripping true life story of the late controversial world-renowned artist David Wojnarowicz. Not sure how I pronounce that. Sorry, David. From his experience as a child prostitute to his homelessness to the devastating illness that made him a pariah and took the lives of his dearest friends. Written by the artist himself shortly before his death, the 64-page prestige one-shot is beautifully illustrated by James Romberger. Crikey. Sounds depressing. But it does sound like it ties back to the AIDS virus deaths that we've got represented here and here on our splash page. So virality is a thing. Just when you think The Invisibles isn't about 2020, it is. On the back page, an advert for Loaded. Basically, we did an advert for Loaded. It's like a shoot 'em up computer game with like blood. We discussed an advert for this before, and the guy on that one was called Fwank, which was funny because it was wank with an F in front of it. This guy's called Butch, and I think you wouldn't get away with that these days, and I think that is a good thing. So that's it for this issue sewed. 2 hours. Not too bad. I am quite tired though. Let me know that I'm an idiot on @BobsyMindless. Thank you for supporting on Patreon, patreon.com/Diane podcast. Interesting things afoot in Diane World. If you are interested in that kind of tackle, we will tackle quite shortly. Rosie and me did a Shadow Trap episode around Halloween about pounds. So go and check that out if you haven't already. And yeah, more from us as a team soon. 2020, we kind of put the Diane project on hold for a little bit while we all stayed indoors. And although we're still staying indoors, it's given us a nice chance to think about new things that we could do. So we're doing that. So watch that. Quite excited about it. Thanks for watching. Bye.